Starting off this conversation, I wanted to wind back a minute essentially around like your first couple weeks at Digio. I think we should start there. You mentioned in your post about how when you came into Digio, you noticed there were some marketing foundations there that you could play with and work with. And it was really about, to kind of quote you, you said it lacked cohesion in our identity and focus. And so I think like most times marketers would come into that, or someone who's trying to create a playbook for a Digio that's like, cool, like where do I go? Where do I start? And so I guess for you, you had an eye to see what was the signal within all of that noise within Digio, right? And so I guess maybe can you walk us through or walk me through what you saw in those first couple of weeks? Like what was the stuff that was really you thought was like, hey, I can work with this versus like, hey, we need to completely rebuild and this is what we're gonna go execute on.
Yeah. I think back to that time, there was so much going on. It was so exciting and also overwhelming. I feel like that's one of the things that doesn't get talked about enough. Like we were coming in as a marketer to a more established company, but even like you're going from 0 to 1, like there's nothing. Yeah. There's a lot of places you can go. There's a lot of landmines. There's a lot of noise and people have a lot of opinions about marketing. Everyone is a marketer at a SaaS company. Yeah. So I think that there is, for me, like I started consulting to hire. So I was a little bit aware of Digio about 2, 3 months back. I was having conversations. My CRO, Allison, her and I have history. I got to meet our CEO, Rishi. Like, so I kind of came in with some context around what were things that were going on already that were, slowing down the sales cycle, maybe not creating enough pipeline products, either, where the roadmap was headed or, things that were falling up a little bit flat. So I feel like I had a lot of context that not the average person might have coming in. So I was a little bit of an advantage with that. But for me, like a couple of the things that I took into coming in was like, I have a roadmap and a plan I build for everywhere I go. It's templates that I build. So I've got every single thing from like channel breakout to how we think about internally to how we think about gaps and things I'm seeing. So like I have like, I mean, if you were to look at it, it could fill up like a room of kind of things of like, here's the entire world of Digio that I see. And I'll start to, over the first couple of weeks, narrow that world in. So I don't make any assumptions before I have a time to talk to customers, talk to the team, poke around the products, poke around the website, go through the funnel, the sales cycle, all those things. I feel like a lot of people
Yeah.
come in and they put up wins, which is momentum building for sure. But I feel like you don't want to put yourself in a position where you're not able to go too wide before you get too narrow on some of those things. So I felt like for me, it was really important to have that time to just learn the product. And so what I realized through that was, hey, like we don't have demand problem right now. We have more of a problem of identity right now. And I was in a great position where we had great inbound coming in already through our lot of organic traffic and our paid ads and all the things that were going on. So for me, I had that luxury, but that also gave me the ability to think through, hey, like when we get really good at the next phase of Digio, which for me was building great content, was narrowing in who we were and how we talk about ourselves, some of those more kind of product market kind of considerations as well.
Yeah. I love that. Okay. So and I think I need to take a step back on two things. Well, the first thing is like, I didn't give you a chance to talk about what Digio was, but like Digio for the people listening is, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's a zero party platform to help direct to consumer brands learn more about the behaviors and preferences of their shoppers so that they can better customize and personalize the shopping experience, the email, SMS, all the different touch points to help the brand drive a closer relationship with the shoppers and existing customers. Is that a fair summary?
I think most people know Digio for quizzes or for pop-ups or point solutions. And that was actually one of my challenges, was that we were considered a point solution and we are a platform. We offer all these things that can capture data and then activate that data. We work with over 2,000 brands. We've been around for about 10 years. Digio started as a reseller business, and now we are fully in this direct marketing and sales motion that we've been building out over the last 2 years or so.
Yeah, that's dope, dude. I want to dive into that a little bit, but you mentioned something earlier, which is like you have this model or framework that you always use and go into. I would imagine you just didn't automatically have that. You probably have built that over time. So maybe can you walk us through a little bit of what are some of those foundational aspects of your framework? Because I would imagine they'd be super helpful for the people listening here.
Totally. I think I've been blessed to have some great mentors in my time as a marketer. Probably the most notable, a guy named Mike Volpe. He was the former CMO of HubSpot. He was an investor in Wonderment, company that I worked at for a little while, Mike helped me build basically a marketing plan that I use everywhere I go now, that has, all the way down from how you plan a quarter to a year, and then also how you think about the business in general and how you communicate to your C-level and your internal team around the story that marketing is creating. So some of the things that I always think about, I'll have in sort of this framework is, what are our drivers of demand? How does the funnel look today? What are the gaps in that funnel? Do we have enough content to service that funnel? Do we have enough budget to be able to create the demand? Kind of like, I mean, none of this is like rocket science type stuff. I think this is very much, like most marketers will probably have a form of this. But for me, like some of the mainstays that I look for in any company, and this is how I just think about marketing in general, is like, do we have partners that we can actually market with? Do we have customers that we can market with? And then also, do we really have a strategy around building content that can help us to build those partners and the customers? What are the things that we need to build? Do we have people to support those things? And do we have budget or resources to be able to go out and do those things? So those are some of the things that I really have in that plan overall. A lot of the plan can also, for me, look at an audit of what is going on right now. What are the things that we want to either go invest in or kill off? That was a thing that I had to really go through here.
Yeah.
The old way of thinking about marketing versus the new way of thinking about marketing. And I like that is kind of a scary thing for someone coming in who might have someone who was there before them, or maybe the founder was the marketer before as well. So you're sort of like killing off someone's baby, if you will. And that's kind of a really brash way of saying it, but it is like, for me, like the plan is also like, we need to be bold and take a pretty aggressive stance about how we're going to change things. I feel like incrementality is not the right way to think about coming in and building a marketing plan unless you're at a very late stage company. So
Yeah.
I feel like for me, that plan is always like, we're going to really shake things up and we're going to kind of rethink about marketing at this business. So those are some of the mainstays. I don't know if I answered your question, but that's sort of the things that I think about.
Yeah, absolutely did. And like what you're sharing reminds me of one of the things I mentioned in my recent newsletter. This guy named Matt Lerner, he was one of the B2B GDM leads at PayPal in the earlier days. And in this article that he talks about that I reference is for brands or for companies that are looking to go from 0 to 1, they need to figure out what their growth levers are. And his definition of a growth lever is essentially what are the activities that take up 10% of your time or effort and drive 90% of the results. And he was talking about how PayPal had done everything under the sun, so much of it that they invested in, and it really didn't add up to pipeline or revenue for the company. But what he identified was like 3 core things that it led to. And so what I hear from you, why I'm sharing that is because it sounded like when you came in and you kind of did an analysis, you said pipeline wasn't necessarily, inbound leads wasn't necessarily an issue. How you view marketing as like content, or content is marketing, and partnerships is a very key aspect for you. How did you go into that thinking, how do we pull the levers on our content and on our existing partnerships or new partnerships to help us craft the identity, right? What was the identity you were trying to go for? And then how did you see content and partnerships support that?
For sure. So I think for us, Digioh, I mentioned, been around for about 10 years. We have been really building a direct marketing motion, meaning we weren't being resold. People were buying us directly, coming, booking a demo, those sorts of things, only for about 2 years, but really from today versus, kind of where we're at, maybe 3. But, when we looked at when I started, a lot of the inbound that was coming in, and this is one of the keys of the Digioh platform, is we can service almost any, vertical. We can service publishers like Dotdash Meredith, and we can service the small startup Shopify stores wanting to just have a quiz on their website. But what that creates is a very, very large, expansive gap of like your identity, who you are. Are you servicing publishers? Are you servicing e-commerce brands?
Yeah.
Like what do you talk? You can't be everything to everybody. I say this a lot to my team. And so I really wanted us to focus on marketing. As a business, we were already moving towards e-commerce, Shopify, Klaviyo focused brands. So that was what the messaging to position and move towards and pivot towards, I should say. So our content needed to be very e-commerce focused. So playbooks, I have playbook behind me here, these things, but I'm a big believer in content. So we create lots of playbooks here. We create lots of strategy. This is a big funnel driver for us. When we were looking at creating strategy, it was like, we needed to create resources that the brands that we're inbounding looking for. So how to think about using the services that Digioh provides in their day-to-day workflows, including partners in that. So Klaviyo is one of our strategic partners. We wrote this playbook with them. Where do partners fit into that narrative? I'm always like thinking about category creation when I think about marketing in general. And so for us, like, we're creating an ecosystem of where we have partners that fit into the Digioh narrative. We have our customers that fit into the Digioh narrative. And then, we put forth, whether it's playbooks, whether it's webinars, whether it's any of those things, we want to make sure that we give resources that the brands who are coming to us are already looking for. So there's no questions when they come into the sales cycle. They are educated, they understand the value props that we deliver. So boiling this all back up, right? Like, this didn't exist 18 months ago. We were, very much trying to be everything to everybody. And that was causing bad fit leads to come into the funnel. That was causing customers that ended up churning off of the product, or maybe not closing through a sales cycle, bogging down the sales cycle. Like, we don't really want people to close in a day, but we want to make sure that they close and they understand the value, and the product is well tooled to position those things.
Yeah.
Who is your best customers?
Yeah.
So those are some of the things that we kind of thought about and worked through within how we thought about our content strategy. It's been ever moving, for the kind of history of Digioh. Like, organic SEO was sort of the big kind of driver of growth for the company. SEO, as many people know, has been totally wrecked by AI and changed. And, whole kind of like, even within the verticals that we service, SEO is not the most important thing. So for me, I had to make a decision that was a very difficult one to get buy-in initially, but was that, hey, we're going to not invest in the thing that drove growth for the last 8 years. We're going to go do things that actually might feel like we're in outer space right now, like partner marketing, like content, like events, the things that, we didn't have proof points to point to. But my experience told me that, like, this is the things that we need to be marketing and focusing on to be more narrow in our targeting as a business.
Yeah. Oh, love that. I feel like that's such a crucial moment to like make that bet. Cause I'm essentially, you're kind of betting your career, right? Like, hey, I mean, regardless of whether or not you had the experience doing these things, like you were in a new team, right? So, I mean, that took some cojones to do that. Like, was it purely like the experience that you knew, or like, was there also just like, I'm just jumping out in faith and I'm willing to bet my career on it? Because I think for me, one of the things that I really admire about you is you shared one of the lessons you had was like, I also needed to understand, how do I communicate what marketing's doing and to drive to revenue, right? So those, I would imagine, like, that was also a part of the conversation and making that bet, is like, I need to communicate, like, this might not show revenue right away, but like, I need to show there is fruit here. So like, how'd you navigate that decision? And then what were some of the key messages you were trying to communicate in that narrative to the team?
Yeah. I think one of the things that I have learned from mentors that I've had, but then also experienced in past roles, like, where I've always been creating content, I've always been building awareness, whether that was at Attentive, being a face for the business and speaking on and doing all those things all the time. At Wonderment, with all the partner marketing that we were doing, it was like I was doing a lot of things. I was making a lot of impact that I could see, but the business couldn't see that impact maybe as clearly. And what I learned was that, like, this is like straight from like great marketers like Dave Gerhardt, for example, always communicate back in revenue outcomes. So if you're going to go do a big social push, or you're going to go do a big webinar push, what does that actually mean for the business at large? You're going to get a lot of blank stares if you go into a board meeting or an executive meeting. You're like, guys, we're just doing a bunch of social pushes right now, and impressions are up and clicks are up. Is that good? Is that bad? Like, what does that mean? So I'm always focused on like pipeline. I always, whenever I do like a 5-minute marketing update, every single week I send a Loom video to the entire business, and it's, hey, here's the things that we did this week. Here's the outcomes that happened from that, from a pipeline perspective. And not everything you do in marketing is easy to draw pipeline to, but if you start to ask better questions of yourself of like what those impacts are, it becomes easier to communicate that out. So I look at that as like, it's really simple. Here's what the pipeline is. Here's what's closed won. Here's the leads that are in the funnel. But you can sort of distill down all of the activities that you're doing into those couple core metrics. It helps you get a lot of buy-in when you're trying to do things that have never been done before. So if there's not like proof points there to point to, you need to be able to validate at least in some way. And that is revenue focused, like kind of like outcomes. that's helped me gain a lot of buy-in. And I think overall, just getting resources, getting help, getting all the things that I think a lot of marketers want and need when they come to businesses like this. So those are some of the things, man. I think a lot of it is, not new and novel, I believe, but I also know that a lot of times what I hear from other marketers is they really struggle to get the buy-in and company to see their impact in the short term. The average span of a marketing leader is 18 months or less. And a lot of that comes back to the internal selling that they weren't maybe able to do and get by effectively across the business.
Yeah. Oh, that's good because I mean, we both know when you get a CMO that comes in or whoever the marketing leader is, like the top things that they change is like the website and all those things. And it's not necessarily needing a brand refresh, more so like positioning and really getting closer to the customer, which it sounds like you've innately had that through staying in email and SMS across your career. And then at the same time, you had those quality on the ground insights from doing the work yourself with partnerships, with webinars, with events. And so coming into Digioh, it sounds like even though it felt like it was outer space for them, sometimes like partner leads, like they take time, right? Like especially for an agency, if you're partnering with agencies in which your product works really well with, you can't just come in expecting like they're going to do a lead or give you leads right after you do a demo, right? And so I guess like you go to an event and you put something on, what were some of those, either walk us through what was one of the first outer space ideas or events or experiences that you did, emotions, and how did you communicate what you were looking to see that was the engagement that would lead to pipeline down the road? Because you talk about 70% of your investment should be short term, and then another 20 to 30% should be for long term. And you have a unique take on that approach of all of your marketing hitting both. How did you explain that, or what were you looking for in that first experience or GDM motion?
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the core tenets that there was a couple that I pitched to the team, but one of them was that this mentality of like Digio everywhere. And I wanted us to I wanted our prospects, customers, or partners to see Digio like multiple times a week in their feeds and their day to day, like everything, and in a good way, not just like we're showing up, we're blasting, spam into the feed, right? But like I wanted to be like value add. And so like that's social, that's email, that's content, that's partner marketing. Like there's all these are flywheel. It's not just one individual channel, but that doesn't always yield results in the short term. But what it does is it creates brand association. And what Digio struggled with was no one knew who we were. Really to put yourself on the map takes a lot of reps of, good impressions and show positive light. And so like that was kind of a hard pitch actually to get initially. It was like, hey, like we're just gonna be like out there and doing cool things and present. I have a little bit of an unfair advantage of Digio in that I use tools like this in my D2C marketer days and, add a little bit more of a subject matter expertise to this. So there was that there, a lot of partner experiences that I've had as well, kind of like helping me to bring a little bit of a different perspective to how we show up everywhere. But a lot of that stuff, I mean, from like those investments to, I mean, on week number 2, I was like, hey, we're gonna rebuild the entire, website. We're gonna rebrand Digio. We're gonna do all these things that like you might not see the impacts in 2, 3 months, but like in 6 to 12 to 18 months, we're gonna be really dang glad we did those things. Those were maybe not hard sells because I feel like I was really fortunate. My CEO and CRO are very open to change and doing those things, but that's not always the case for other marketers. And so a lot of what I focused on was revenue outcomes and some of those wins and some of that stuff there. But I think as well, like, what are the wins in the 0 to 1 month or 2 to 3 month horizon that we can still stack up as we're building these long-term wins? So that kind of comes into like your budget and how you spend things. A lot of people will tell you that you need to think about your marketing plan or your marketing budget in terms of a 70-30 split, 20 split, where 80% of that is demand focused and 20% is brand focused. I actually think it should just be 100% goes into demand and brand together because you can't in this day and age build a great SaaS business without having a brand. For us, like we were always like, whether that was webinars, whether that's content, whether that's partner marketing, any of those things, like we're trying to hit on both of those goals always. And so like be everywhere, but then also to have great content, have a great message and market, have great customers that you can market to and through. So I feel like I'm kind of like, not even answering your question directly, but those are some of the things that I've kind of had to rethink and reposition for us as we think about marketing. Marketing is, we're always planting seeds Some of those seeds grow faster. Some of those seeds take way, way longer to grow, but you can't just be looking at marketing in a 3-month window. You have to be always, always planting seeds.
Yeah. Have you seen any of those longer term bets pay off yet? And if so, what does that look like in your data, your analysis as you're doing these weekly presentations to the team?
Totally. I think a lot of these have manifested. I mean, not everything's been manifested either. Right? There are, for every win, there's a loss. But I think some of the biggest ones, it's just like the funnel, looking at how people are hearing about us when they come in. I mean, we grew from 2023 to 2024, grew 85% year over year on marketing source revenue. Our marketing closed one revenue, sorry, I should say. Source is even higher than that. And this year, we're surpassing even last year's growth. And a lot of that is the intentional focus that I kind of mentioned of marketing to just a single, like kind of ICP or industry, like e-commerce. But like, one of the things that has been incredible to see is our events presence and how that's actually layered in really nice. So we just had our best event ever did at Grow LA. And last year, events were sort of break even for us. There were events where we lost money. There were events where we made a little bit of money and sort of kind of amalgamated to like a kind of a wash. But what I looked at wasn't just demand that we drove from the events. It was brand awareness. It was having conversations with brands. It was content sessions that we did where we were sort of like planting the seeds in the minds of, our customers. Hey, we're here. This is what we do. And I think what we saw grow this year in 2025, it was the best event we've ever done, endless amount of pipeline demos that have resulted from that. But that took 18 months prior of doing events, of targeting these people on LinkedIn with ads and showing up at webinars and doing all these things, right? So to me, it was the whole kind of sum of all of the content, partner marketing, and events pushes that we've been making. And we're seeing a lot of that stack up here now with more pipeline growth here in 2025 as a result of that. Hasn't happened overnight, though. It's definitely taken a lot of concerted efforts across.
Yeah. Well, you touched on something too, like that I think is so foundational, and having been on the sales side and the partner side and the marketing side, like you said, like, how did you hear about us? And like, I think that is, it sounds so like, well, duh, you should be asking that question. You'd be surprised at how many AEs don't ask that question in the first initial conversation, talking to a brand that's scheduled a demo. And I think that is so crucial for marketers. And I don't know how many of these marketers out there like leveraging like call recordings to like try to pick that up. So like, I guess like for why I bring that up is because like, I think one, that's so foundational, and it makes me think about, for you guys, do you guys have a sales team, or is it more just product led growth? And then you guys are kind of like taking on the like account services or account management, merchant success. Are they taking on those calls? Like, how do you guys manage that?
Yeah. So we do have a dedicated sales team. Awesome sales team. Is the best sales team I've ever had the pleasure of working with. So our sales process is, book a demo, probably a discovery call, and then 1 or 2 technical calls. We're typically about a 2 to 4 call close product. There's a lot to consider. We're a little bit higher price point. We have managed services that we offer, suite of products, all those things. So for us, marketing's job actually is not even done once we hand off leads to sales. And so, it is important for us to have good feedback loops around, hey, we're talking about leads that came in, what could have been better, what resources we're a bootstrap. It's a little different than other businesses maybe who might be listening to this. So I think for us, the way we spend our budgets and the way we think about things is very much continual improvement and refinement, and a much quicker cycle, if you will. So I think for us, like our sales cycle and the way that marketing hands off, and then even create additional resources to help close those leads, we're very much working forth on that. One of, I think, the superpowers of this business is that I think as we've been able to increase demand, we've got a great sales team to be able to close those leads as well. I think that marketing sales alignment was one of the core things that I pitched and positioned when I joined the company. It was like, we need that to be successful, because you can generate a bunch of pipeline, if you can't close it, you got a problem. And that is, for us, comes down to being really, really aligned on how marketing is talking about, Digioh, and then the sales team as well is talking about Digioh in the same way. So there's that continuous alignment on messaging and positioning.
Yeah.
Well.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay. I want to go back to the conference circuit with Grow LA, but then you also just made me think about the relationship between marketing and sales. And as you came in and you were doing building the identity of Digioh, like who are we? that requires a strategic narrative that you have to tell. And that means that you have to also educate the sales team that's either there or coming in. So like, can you walk through a little bit of like how you helped create the enablement or the education to the sales team to start talking about that? Like, because of course, like sales is gonna go in, they're gonna try to close business, right? So for someone to come in and say like, "Hey, here's how we need to talk about Digio," it's like, really, bro? Like, you gonna tell me how to close business? I'm already crushing. So, because pipeline wasn't an issue, right? So, like, how did you have that conversation with the sales team?
Yeah. I think it's like one of the things that maybe doesn't get talked about enough, but is have like humility about things. I feel like what often happens is like marketing is seen as like a very opinionated bunch, and then sales is sort of like we're just here to close deals and like we know what we do. It was like the marketing team and the sales team didn't always get along at the end of the day. And I think like that common ground that you can build is like really, I think it comes back to the genius of our CRO, Allison, was that she set up attribution in a way where like there was no fighting. There was no, even with partnerships. I think partnerships and sales is kind of the same thing in a way. That is, if you have good attribution set up, you're not fighting over things, that can actually alleviate a lot of the initial friction there. But for me, it was like, I'm just a thought partner here. I'm here to help you close more deals. I'm here to help make your wallet fatter. I'm here to do all the things, right? So like for me, I want to be able to show, we talked rebrand, positioning, the identity of the company. I was in conversation with the sales team before I even joined here. So I kind of knew some of the problems in the sales cycle and some of the things they were facing. Sales is always going to want more assets. They're always going to want more enablement. Like that is always going to be a problem. But I think what you can really do is help them to refine the pitch. And we built a new sales deck, brought in much more examples, content around all the things that customers were already doing and building Digio. We just need to be able to simplify that down because Digio is a very robust product. There's a ton of things you can do, but like the average buyer only cares about one or two things, probably at most. So helping them to see that, like, let's simplify the pitch down, relevant examples of what people are doing, content. So like even building playbooks like this, even building resource libraries, I really kind of took it upon myself to just be like, I am here to help you close more deals through having better resources and content. And I think like stacking up some of the wins that we were able to do help build a lot of trust and momentum there. Yeah, I've been very fortunate. This is probably the best relationship I've had with sales at any role I've had. And a lot of that stems from, I think, all the stuff I just mentioned.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That I think that's such a pain point between sales and marketing. And to your point, like they're always looking for a new case study to target a specific brand that seems to be the unique snowflake of the day, but that's just not normally the situation. What you've been kind of like surfacing without really saying it too much is like you guys have a point of view in the market to create this content, which is engaging, right? People are coming to your content, whether that's the conferences and having those panel interviews, because we all know, like when you go to a conference, like it's so much surface level fluff on the stage that really the best content that's being shared is in the hallways. I think that takes a point of view and an angle to have in order to create content that's going to be engaging. And then to your point, you created that physical asset, which I want to hear more about. How did you come in to Digio to figure out what that angle was? Because it sounds like so many marketers struggle with creating great content. And a lot of it has to do with, because I think I mentioned this before, but like 86% of marketers outsource content creation. And like, I don't, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think you're doing that. I think you are personally creating the content internally. Maybe there's stuff that you outsource a little bit, but like, how do you take that upon yourself as a marketer to create that content that then fun? Because essentially what that is like you said, great marketing comes from content, or content is great marketing if you do it well. And obviously it's paying off for you. Also, how did you come in saying, hey, we're going to create the content and like put that on yourself? Because I imagine that takes a lot of work in addition
Yeah,
to running and creating a GTM playbook from 0 to 1.
totally. That's a great question. I think a couple thoughts come to my mind. I said this a lot, when I was coming to Digio. I think a lot of SaaS companies play too safe. They don't have a point of view about where they sit in the market. They don't want to be interesting, or maybe they just lack interest in their content. Vanilla doesn't sell in most cases, unless like you sell something that is just so in demand that people will buy, whether you're, a snooze fest or not. I think content is a great way just to create differentiation and a moat around your business. For me, like a lot of how I thought about the the content at Digioh was actually getting out into our customers, and also just prior experience I've had in this industry. I've been in the same industry here for my entire career in commerce. And so I had a really boots on the ground view of what gaps in the market. It's what you mentioned. The best content is in the hallways. I've done 2 podcasts now. I did one at Wonderman and one at Caro. I got to talk every single week to people building really cool stuff, inside secrets and the kind of hallway conversations that I was having. On top of, I actually was a D2C marketer myself. And so I was able to have an unfair advantage, and like I knew things that people were missing, and we could just do some of those things in our content. I knew that it would create more of an authenticity within how people perceive a Digioh, for example. And so I think that that was an angle I've always took, is like, I want someone to feel like they consumed a piece of our content. They would pay me money, but I gave it away for free. And if you can do that, passes that test, it's a big, big plus. Honestly, I think a lot of people, you mentioned 86% of people not doing in-house content. That's a huge shame. And I think now what's even happening more is people are outsourcing a lot of that to AI. And we use AI every day here at Digioh. I don't shy away from that. But I can tell you, like, what is really concerning to me is like creating a whole playbook or a whole cornerstone thing with usage of AI. And it doesn't feel authentic at the core level of like what content is meant to do, which is create connection and like purpose. But I do think that what's, for us, like, I'm so blessed to be able to work with, I think, one of the best content marketers that I've ever worked with. She's full-time here now, Marissa Sanford. She wrote this entire book. This is Commerce Marketer's Guide to Zero Party. I keep bringing it up on this conversation, but like for us, this is thought leadership. This is, how Digioh works in the day of who we want to sell Digioh to. But it also shows them how they can do it for themselves. Like, it's not me, me, me. It's here's where you sit in that journey. Content should be interesting, it should be valuable. They should feel like they should have paid money for that. But it also really should put them in the driver's seat. I do some of those things right. Yeah, it's a grind. We do all our content in-house. We don't have someone outsourcing it, but I feel like it will pay dividends for you, and it has for us, clearly, within our funnel growth over the last 18 months or so through content. So I do think that is one of the best investments. And I think it also hits on, for us, it's on every single channel that we do, from our paid ads to our partner marketing to our events, organic, like all the things. Great content is worth all that.
Yeah. And then you can repurpose it. I would imagine you're also repurposing like that playbook just didn't come up out of thin air. I would imagine it was curated from multiple conversations, the main pain points on sales calls that then bubbled up into like, hey, let's just create the playbook.
Totally. And that, I mean, it's constant feedback loops, as well. And that even on the post-sales side with our CS and support teams, what were the things that our customers were asking for? So definitely a cross-collaborative way. I think also that content is sometimes seen as it's pawned off on a junior marketer or an outsourced hand or things like that. But the best content is typically sitting with your CEO, your CS and support teams, and your sales teams. If you can get feedback from those kind of couple of groups and bring them together, you don't need to look too far for content outside of that. And talk to your customers as well. Those are givens. But yeah, no, it definitely was a very collaborative kind of approach for playbooks like this, for example.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I think that's a good place to stop too. Like, for people who are essentially coming into marketing or building a playbook, it doesn't have to be this huge, massive playbook that you've physically made. Like, it could be as simple as, hey, what are the top trends coming from the 5 different departments, and like what's resonating, and just going there and seeing what resonates when you send out a message on LinkedIn or email. So that's awesome, dude. Well, in terms of like wrapping up here, where can people follow you? Where can they learn more about Digioh? Obviously, they got the physical playbook there. Like, if they want to access that, where do they need to go?
Yeah, for sure. Just go to www.digioh.com. Tons of resources there. You can see all the workflows and things that we got connected to Steal My Ideas. Like, please, I'd love to just kind of give as much as I can on that front. You also find me on LinkedIn. Send me a message if you want to chat. I just love to give back and help. I've had great mentors in my life, so I'm very much focused on paying forward however I can too. So yeah, LinkedIn, find me there. Also just on the core Digioh site as well.
Well, hang on for a quick sec. We'll wrap up here, but everyone, thanks for joining, and we'll talk to you soon. Peace.